We're also appreciative of the amazing sponsors that we have that support us in the work that we're doing. The silver sponsors are listed on the screen right here that support our advocacy efforts. We also have some gold sponsors, JR Automation, Request Foods, and Tierra Yachts. Will you join me in thanking our silver and gold sponsors? Our lead advocacy sponsor that works with us all year long to support our advocacy program, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Thank you, Blue Cross. And today we have a special program sponsor, Corewell Health. I'm joined here this morning by Janine Dahlman, the director of the Corewell Health Foundation of West Michigan. That's a mouthful. Janine, thank you for joining us this morning. You know, we've heard a lot about Corewell Health's desire to keep care local. How's that being played out here in our community?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Access is really important to us here at Zeeland Hospital. So recently we have added 2 new urologists that are practicing out of our Lakewood clinic. They're also doing surgeries here at Zeeland Hospital. We have a great partnership with Shoreline Orthopedics, and so we are not only partnering with Shoreline, but we're also incorporating some additional orthopedic surgeons through Corewell Health, and they'll be servicing each of our, the Lakewood Clinic, the Grand Haven Center, and Zeeland Hospital. And in addition to that, we've got a couple more. Yeah. We have 2 new obstetricians, and we have 3 certified nurse midwives, so we're bringing more access to maternity care. And then we have plans to expand our medical arts building at the hospital so that we can provide additional provider space as we grow.
That's fantastic. As our community continues to grow, that access to health care is so critical. It's not just access to care, but quality care. And Corewell continues to be recognized for the quality work that they've been doing. Can you tell me how you track that and the goals that you've been achieving?
Yeah, we really have a great commitment to our patient care and excellence, exceptional care to our patients. Some of the things that we track as metrics, so we have metrics around hand washing, preventable hospital-acquired conditions, falls, patient satisfaction, and avoidable readmissions when it's not necessary, so preventing readmissions. And then we have a number of awards and accreditations that we've received that help us validate that we're hitting those goals. Things like the Vizient Award, and that is something that we are ranked 7th out of over 300 hospitals that are in our peer group across the nation, and we've done that for the last 3 years, and we've improved every year. Our Center for Medicaid and Medicare, we are a 5-star rated hospital, and that's really rating patient safety, and we have achieved that for the last 6 years. And then we're also a Leapfrog Grade A hospital, and we've been rated that for the last 15 years in West Michigan. That is like unheard of. So we're doing an incredible job. And then finally, our team. You know, I think because we are a smaller hospital, I'll say, in Zeeland, we know a lot of our patients. I mean, it's our family and friends, and they're really committed to high quality care and caring for their neighbors.
Congratulations. Those are phenomenal recognition of great work that you're doing. You know, we talked a little bit about the fact that we have sponsors here, and you as a foundation, I'm sure, are working in that philanthropy space as well. So can you talk a little bit about how that works for the foundation and some of the projects that you're working on right now?
Sure. One thing that I don't know if a lot of people really know about our foundation at Corewell Health is that 100% of donations that go into the foundation go to programs and services directly. So we don't have the administrative overhead that a lot of nonprofits may have, and that's because we have some funding from Corewell Health System, and we also have an endowment that's set up to help cover that. So when you make a contribution to Zeeland Hospital, you know it's going directly to patient care, to programs, to services, which is just phenomenal. Some of the things that we have really focused on in the last few years have been our additional dedicated C-section rooms, so that when our mothers have an emergency C-section, we bring them in, we have a space ready for them to go. So that's been a real blessing for us. We've also focused a lot on community health, and so we've done things like the school blue envelope in the school systems, teaching our staff how to elevate a student if they present with suicidal tendencies, we can get them into the system and get them elevated and get them the help that they need immediately. We're also doing things like the coordinated approach to child health in our elementary schools, which helps work on our goals for our community health needs assessment that address obesity and nutrition with kids. And then we're working currently, maybe some of you have seen the mud in the front of the hospital, but we are actually working a little bit more on well-being and team member well-being for our visitors and our patients. We're creating an outdoor space so that people can go out and just get some fresh air and get some time away from the hospital.
That's fantastic. Janine, thank you for the incredible work that you're doing in our community and for your ongoing support of the work that we're doing at the West Coast Chamber. Will you join me in thanking Janine and Corewell Health?
Thank you. Can I add one more plug?
Absolutely.
Okay, so our biggest fundraising initiative is the youth behavioral health clinics that are going into Zeeland East and West High School. And so we've been doing a number of fundraisers around that, providing access to mental health at the schools. And so September 14th and 15th, if you are pickleball players or enjoy watching, please come out to Helder Park because we'll be holding another tournament then.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks, Janine. Okay, and with that, we're ready to get on to the main portion of our program this morning. We're so glad to have Congressman Huizenga joining us again this morning, and Mike Hill back to facilitate the conversation. So with that, please join me in welcoming Mike Hill and Congressman Huizenga.
Thank you very much, Jody. It's great to have the opportunity to be back here with our Congressman and have a wonderful conversation. I was trying to think how long I've been doing this and had this opportunity, and it's over 10 years. So it's now Thanksgiving, go get the Christmas tree and get the decorations out and plan for this event. So it's a must-see, must-be event. So glad that you could join us. Any remarks for us to kick this thing off this morning, Congressman Huizenga?
Well, good to be with you, and I will be on my way out shortly afterwards. We have one more day or one more week in the land of Oz, Washington. So I'll be headed to the airport here shortly, but it is really good to be here with you, Michael, and everybody that's here. I do want to call out a couple of folks I've got here from my team. Todd Whiteman, who is my chief of staff, who had been district director, who many of you know as Councilman Todd, or with the Lakeshore Disability Network. Todd's been with me, as he describes it, COVID plus 6 weeks. So whatever black hole that you peg to COVID, that's how long Todd's been with. Trevor Tenbrink, who is my former legislative director out in Washington. He and his wife Kelly just had their second child and had some crazy notion that maybe they ought to have something called a house with a yard, and decided to move back from Washington to West Michigan. So Trevor's here. Ben McLeod, who has been newer to our team. Ben had done a lot of work. Some of our Lansing friends may recognize Ben. He had worked with a state senator out of the Battle Creek, Kalamazoo area, and has been a great addition to the team. And then Jim Berry, my brother, who has helped on the campaign right from the very beginning, was my original campaign chairman, my campaign chair now, and heavily involved in that. And so that's, I don't think everybody else, that's it from the team. Yeah, you're stepping on my, I'm bearing the lead here a little bit. My wife Natalie is here with us, so yes, I won't feel bad when there's a larger round of applause for Natalie than for me. But it's been great. Kids are sort of far flung. And around. Oldest is getting married. The end of this month. It's coming quick. So apparently I've gotten older. Natalie hasn't somehow. Second oldest, you may have caught in the news, was in Jerusalem when Hamas invaded. So he is back home and safe. Then our daughter is working in New York in media. Then Will, a couple of people had actually, Paul Cope had asked about Will. He's running track at Liberty down in Virginia and doing well, double major, Spanish and criminal justice. We'll see where that goes. He might be heading south. I don't know. And then we've got a high school senior, Seeger. So it's been busy and active. I do want to also acknowledge, I've got a lot of friends and a lot of folks that we've interacted with over the years. With Joe Hune from my time in the state legislature, who works with Blue Cross, and Amanda, who has been a dear friend for a long time, has decided to retire from serving the county and the state and all the things that she had done. And so there's so many more. But I do want to acknowledge Ren and Elsa Prince Brookhuizen. Mrs. PB, as I lovingly call her, has been a dear friend since my high school days when I used to raid her refrigerator. And she turns 91 in 2 days. So happy birthday to Elsa. And I know that this community knows this, but not everybody does. This town would not be what it is if it wasn't for the families like the Princes, the Hayworths, the Padnoses, others, and we appreciate that dedication to our great community, which apparently was just voted one of the most Christmassy cities in the country. Well, it's only because of the snow melt and all the other cool stuff that's going on. So again, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and spend a little time with you today.
Thank you so much, Bill. So,
yeah, we've gone through that before where he's done the honorific thing, but he's yelled at me enough about insurance issues and other things that Bill is just good.
Thank you. So we've tried over the years many different ways to try to accommodate all the feedback from the community and get your questions so that we can get them in front of Congressman Huizenga and get through as many of them as quickly as we can. So thank you for submitting your information. While registering, we've consolidated all that into some hot topics, and so we're going to go through these as quickly as we can. But before we dive into the meat of our conversation, we do this generally once every 12 months or so. And you've had a lot on your plate since we were together last. And so if you could just kind of from a professional standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, can you talk about what your highlight of the last 12 months was that you think we should all know about?
Yeah, it's and Jody touched on this about being busy. Well, as I said to someone earlier today, busy and productive are two different things. This has been quite a wild year for me professionally. And on one hand, everything is going on, and then you look around and sometimes nothing's happening, which is a little frustrating, more than a little frustrating, frankly. But it is probably the highlight for me has been the progress that we have made on a debt commission. And I was sitting here and kind of going over some notes and getting an idea of what some of those questions, and this is the pretty typical question that comes up. What's the biggest challenge? What were your most accomplishment for the year, or whatever it might be? The debt commission and our debt is of significance. And I'm going to, pull out my old man glasses. By the way, Mike Johnson, the new speaker, has made round glasses cool again. So I tell him frequently, thank you for that. But I get a daily debt update. This is something that one of my colleagues put together. I just want to, before I hit the numbers, here's a little bit of the setup. When I got to Congress in 2010, I helped form something called the Balanced Budget Amendment Caucus. This was something that I think was needed to be addressed. It was something that, Amanda, when she was in Lansing, Joe, when he was there, others that may have served. Roger Victory, I think, is here somewhere. I haven't seen him. There he is. The state of Michigan, like almost every other state, with a couple of exceptions, California, New York, and a few others that you might have noticed might not be on such great financial ground, have a requirement to balance the budget every year. We obviously don't have that in Washington, D.C., and I felt that it was important to kind of put a stake in the ground. There had been a vote on having a balanced budget in 1995, having that amendment added to the U.S. Constitution. It passed the House of Representatives, but it did not have the 2/3 required to amend the U.S. Constitution. I just had looked it up. I'm sorry, I forget if it was 2011 or if it was 2012. We had the exact same language. Interestingly, there was about 13 members of Congress who had been there for both that 1995 vote and then again that 2011 vote, including Steny Hoyer, the number 2, or now former number 2 within the Democrat Party, who voted on it. Steny voted yes in 1995 and then voted no in 2011. I don't think the fiscal situation had gotten better, but again, it passed the House, but we did not have that 2/3. I would love to put that up again, but that is frankly a bridge too far politically and policy-wise right now. So in an effort to try to get at that a couple of years ago, a group of us got together, and I think I've talked about this 30 by 30 group in the past. It was 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats. We very consciously decided this was going to be a sort of Noah Ark style, where it was going to be paired up. And we were holding together at the very beginning of COVID, and then when frankly, the IRA, the misnomer, in my opinion, the Inflation Reduction Act, which did nothing but spur on inflation, some of the other massive spending bills that came in that were suddenly, we went from having massively bipartisan bills to massively partisan bills, where there wasn't a single Republican vote for some of these additional spending bills. Our group kind of fell apart. And we've been working over the last year plus trying to rebuild some of that relationship and that trust and what was going on. It's culminated, we've renamed the 30 by 30 group because frankly there aren't 30 Democrats between the retirement and being beaten in elections. But we've rebranded this as the BFF, very intentionally, the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum. And this bipartisan fiscal forum, if you think about, you might have heard of problem solvers and some of those groups. Well, we're not here to solve health care and road funding and space and everything else. This is very focused in on debt and deficit, and we've gotten some real traction. We've had some dinners together that have attracted both House and Senate, which almost never happens in Washington, D.C. We have had some very productive, good conversations, which has culminated in actual legislation. It's a bill that myself and Scott Peters from California are carrying. It calls for a fiscal commission that is going to go in. There's a couple of different iterations of it that have been introduced as well. We have a Senate companion, which is Joe Manchin and Mitt Romney have introduced their bill. I think it was 2 weeks ago now, we had a hearing. We were called in front of the Budget Committee to testify on our bills. Had a very productive conversation, and if you caught my press release, and I know I posted this, one of the most positive conversations actually happened between 2 Democrats on the committee, Scott, my co-chair, and Jimmy Panetta, Leon Panetta's son. And it was just an acknowledgement of the reality. And here is kind of where I'm getting at with the reality. Over the past 365 days, this past year, our national debt has increased by $2.498 trillion in a year. Debt held by the public has increased by $2.323 trillion. So, in other words, a majority of that debt is held by the public. But intergovernmental debt, this is the accounting side that happens. That has grown by $174 billion. And what we have been going through with our appropriations, our spending bills, is very important. It is. Don't get me wrong. But we have been having just knockdown drag amounts about whether we're going to spend $1.471 trillion, so think of $471 billion, or $1.509 trillion. Do not get me wrong and do not misunderstand. $40 billion is still $40 billion. All right? I know Roger would love to have another $40 billion. Sorry, the federal piggy bank's closed right now, Roger. Okay, so let's be very clear about that. But when we are talking about $40 billion versus $2.5 trillion, that we are not going to solve our fiscal issues by tweaking what we are spending in our appropriations bills. We have to do it. We have to go in and get better value for all of our tax dollars that are going in. But just about cursed, sorry, thank you. Doggone it. We owe it to our kids and our grandkids, do we not? To wrestle this dragon to the ground. And I'm sorry, but Social Security, not me saying this, not Scott Peters saying this, the trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund, by law, will be putting a 23% cut into every check that goes out the door in 9 years. So I'm turning 55. All right, I got a few more years of work in here, and I'm going to be just fine. But I think about those guys that, Kurt Wasink was here, and a couple of others I went to high school with. And I know those folks that we went to high school with, and I know what they do for a living. And I'm not sure they're going to be okay. And how can I look them in the eye and say, okay, sorry, you were getting $2,000 a month from Social Security, but that's now going to become $1,400? Where do they go make that up? Right? So let's have some courage, people, to actually tackle this. So 70% of everything that we spend, 70% is on autopilot. I don't vote on it. Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters don't vote on it. Nobody votes on it. It is just automatic spending that happens. And it's time that we re-examine it. So this commission idea, now I will wrap it up. I know I caught the watch look. So
You're doing fine.
the idea of this commission is not to come out with a predetermined outcome. It's not. It is as bipartisan and bicameral as we can make this. Meaning the speaker will have appointments, the minority leader will have appointments, the majority leader and the minority leader in the Senate will have their appointments. We don't have presidential appointments, and here's why. Because we're dealing with legislation. Constitutionally, there's some issues with that. So what we have in these proposals is that these folks, in a very tight time frame, this coming year, will get together. They will put together a package of suggestions, and that package will get an up or down vote. It's unamendable. So in other words, it can't go to the House and suddenly, well, I like this, but I'm going to tweak it here, and suddenly there's all these poison pills added and that kind of thing. Same thing with the Senate. And this would get delivered in lame duck. So after the election, with the very clear eye of trying to not politicize this more than what it's going to be. Just check out my Facebook. You've already seen the attacks. And in my mind, that is probably, sadly, the only way that we are going to have the courage to be able to go do what we need to do to save these programs. It was kind of amazing. One of my colleagues, and he's been very vocal and open about this, the vice chair of the budget committee, Brandon Boyle, who's from Pennsylvania, he literally said in the hearing, he's like, look, we got 9 years to deal with this. What's the rush? Amanda, from the treasurer's perspective, you're looking out at least 9 years, if not longer, right? And same thing with the state. You have to do these projections. That is just jamming your head in the sand, in my opinion. And the idea that we can do nothing will result, and we could. I mean, this whole thing could fail. This whole thing could fail. But here's the reality of that. If we do nothing, there will be a 23% cut in Social Security. There will be somewhere in the teens cut in Medicare, Medicaid. So our friends from Corewell and Holland Hospital and others are going to be suddenly, and the state are going to have to be dealing with that. And that is by law going to happen. So don't know if you're with me or not on this, but we're going to find out. I am hoping that we are going to be able to move on this commission. So we'll probably, I'll preempt your next question. For what am I most happy with this past year? It's probably the progress that we've made on this. What am I most anticipating in this coming year? I hope and pray that whether I'm on this commission or not, I'm okay if I'm not. I just want this commission to get launched and to move forward so that we have a we have a future for our kids and our grandkids and have a better society with that.
So I was driving down the road last week and listening to NPR and hear about a new idea from two congressmen, and I usually tone that out because it's never somebody I know. And they talk about a Democrat from California. I'm like, yep, don't know that guy. And then they say, and Congressman Bill Huizenga, and they start talking about this initiative that you're working on. I sent the story to Todd, and he said that, yeah, we're talking to the White House about it right now as we speak. And so if this comes to pass, and it passed both the House and the Senate in lame duck, do you believe that then the Biden administration would execute on it?
I think there is mounting pressure, and we have had a number of conversations with our friends on the Senate side. They are probably going to be the ones that are going to have to force this onto the White House. Just speaking bluntly, if you talk to the policy people behind the scenes, they are far more amenable and amenable to this, I should say, far more amenable to this than our friends in the communications department of the White House, read political side. They understand. They understand that this could be used as a political cudgel. And anyone who has ever done any kind of space in the public policy realm surrounding these things knows that. I know that. Scott Peters, I give him gold star for courage on these things, for standing up for that. Frankly, in a presidential year where you've had both former President Trump and Joe Biden say that there are some things that can't be and shouldn't be touched or discussed, I think that's just foolish to at least not have the conversation. And so the Republicans have some work as well on this. Certainly the Democrats do, and we'll see. But ultimately it's going to take citizens. It's going to take all of us saying, you know what, we've got to do something. We have to do something about this. And we have got to deal with the $33.8 trillion in debt that we have. Mike, here's the problem. Take every single social program that we deal with on youth, on kids, and everything else. Interest on the debt is more than that. All of our domestic programs rolled up together is just barely over what we spend on interest on the debt. Our Defense Department within 2 years is going to be less than what we spend on interest on the debt. Now, this gets into another area about why the Fed has been increasing interest rates, and a number of us, in fact, we had caught criticism for saying maybe we ought to return to normalcy on our interest rates sooner than what they actually did with quantitative easing and artificially holding interest rates low and those kinds of things. But when we've got now, and frankly, interest rates are, sorry to any of my mortgage folks and bankers here, they're high right now, right? Well, when I was down at formerly known as Timberbrook Realty, I see a couple old heads nodding about they knew that, which is now Green Ridge, and then I went to Woodland, which isn't even Woodland anymore either. But the point is when I was selling real estate, Natalie and I were looking at buying our first house, one of my old mentors, Wayne Boovy, pulled me aside one day. And he said, look, I know you and Natalie are just starting out. I know this is going to be really hard, but you have to buy a house now. Interest rates will never be this low again. They had just gone to 9.95% on 30-year money. Okay? So that's just for a little historical perspective. And then in Jim's first house, what, 14.5% probably? Oh, it was down to 10. Okay. Well, I know that there's plenty of people who bought houses at 14, 15, 13%. I see heads nodding, right? And so, no, if you have a 2.3% mortgage, you're not going to give that up, right? Especially when inflation over the past, by the way, past 3 years is over 17%. 17%. Yes, we're finding ourselves in these odd spots where housing isn't moving because people are locked in with low interest rates, artificially low interest rates, I might add. We've got pockets of really hot economic activity like West Michigan, and then, but we're not normal. We're not the usual, I should say. I would like this to be normal, but we're not the usual for what's going on around the country right now. And I talk to my colleagues, and you look at where unemployment is, and it really varies as to the sector. It really varies as to region. And so the Fed is sitting there trying to figure out what to do. I would argue that if they took just, as they say, the data, they probably would continue to raise interest rates. But there's a lot of pressure, political pressure. Not just, and I don't mean that by R versus D kind of political pressure. There's a lot of voices out there saying, we got to do something about this because commercial real estate is in some trouble, and other places like that. And nobody wants to repeat of 08 and what we went through then. So if we don't do anything, there are things by law that are going to happen that are going to be detrimental. If we don't wrestle this debt and what's been going on, we are going to have interest payments that outstrip both sides of anything that we do as far as defense or domestic spending. And to me, that is just, we are just robbing good programs of their opportunity to get that funding because we have these legal obligations.
So shifting gears, significant portion of the membership here at the Chamber are small business owners and people that are employed by small businesses. So we're heading into an election year. We're teetering on possibly the verge of a recession. Not sure if we're going to see that or not. Is there any practical legislative moves that you can see passing Congress and getting signed into law in the next 12 months or so that would help support small businesses that are struggling with access to capital, that are struggling with rising healthcare costs? Any things that you think might be moving?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and I've had, or even this morning, just had a couple of conversations. I know I referenced Paul earlier. We were talking about some workforce issues, and what is it like, getting skilled trades? What is it like getting engineers? What is it like getting folks to just show up who show up on the line? And I hear that constantly as a challenge. I mean, it pulls in immigration, it pulls in a lot of different elements to this. To me, what I hear still, a lot of our small business folks are still feeling the echo effects of inflation, and it's energy, it's supply chain, and it's labor. Those are the main three elements that really drive what costs have gone up. Could we do something about energy? Absolutely, we could. Absolutely. We have an abundance of energy here in the United States. I think it is a mistake, a policy mistake, to have to go begging to Venezuela and OPEC to make sure that they don't decrease production or ask them to increase their production while we have a tremendous amount of production that we can do ourselves. But the permitting and the philosophy is not allowing us to tap into that. That to me is a huge mistake. By the way, anybody else watch 60 Minutes last night? Okay. Interesting story about Wyoming and kind of what they've been doing there, and I'm not sure I agree with the governor on all of his issues, but his point was that Wyoming has said yes to energy innovation. Whether it's carbon capture, it was very interesting. They're running some data processing sites literally next to oil well heads where they're doing the flare off, and instead of it being flared off, they're pulling gas off to create their own electricity to run these data centers. They believe that I think the number was 100,000 cars equivalent of carbon has been pulled off because of that. You know, things like that. We need to start thinking a little differently and innovatively about that. So, you know, absolutely we could do more on energy. And by the way, if we are doing anything with carbon and we're trying to, whether it's in the automotive, I know we got my friends from Gentex are here and a few other folks. You know, the automotive is huge, right? Obviously in this area. In my mind, a straight EV world is not going to happen. I don't think it's realistic, frankly, and I'm sorry to anybody, but I think Toyota has been doing this right with this notion of hybrids. Guess what? That's the direction the military needs as well. Met with Volta, who's one of our local companies, and a number of others. If you look at one of the biggest challenges our military has, it's in supply chains of food and energy. Those are the two things. How do you get diesel fuel out? How do you do that kind of thing? And when you've got batteries that can recharge themselves on running, you just stretch all of those lines out. And again, so there's some very innovative things that we can do. But if we are going to continue to head down the road of the EVs and a battery world, then we better have electricity. Now, how do you get the electricity? And how do you then transmit the electricity? That is going to be an issue I'll let Roger figure out in Lansing on the permitting on all that stuff. But so you got the energy, you've got supply chain. That has been getting fixed kind of on its own, of its own. I hear from a number of people who are suppliers who have shifted from China to places like Vietnam and others where they have figured out they have to diversify. And I'm always a little confused as to why the business community is surprised that China maybe hasn't been playing this straight up. Hello? This has been decades, right? I mean, decades that they've been doing this. And whether it's on the tech side or whether it's on the low tech side, China's out for China. And hello, we need to wake up to this. That's why the work of we have a commission, we have a committee on China that is bipartisan, evenly split, doing a lot of really, really good work about all of the issues that we have on China and our interaction with China. Don't get me wrong. China is a vital part of the world's economy and the supply chain and what's going on, but we have gotten way too over-dependent on that, in my opinion. Whether it was from paper masks to ventilators to our own batteries and all the other stuff. Pharmaceuticals, hello? I've been saying hello a lot. It's time to wake up, right? But pharmaceuticals, I mean, a tremendous amount of those base ingredients come out of China, and we've got to deal with that. So kind of number two on the supply chain. Number three is workforce. You know, and I know that this is a focus and a concentration, right, Jody, on anybody who is trying to do economic development. You know, we've got a massive battery plant that's going in. They need workers, whether it's our office furniture folks, whether it's our automotive folks, whether it's our boat builders down over here. We've got to have people who are going to go in and actually build those things. So how do we do that? Some of this is generational, right? We've got parents who have said, well, I don't want my kid going into a skilled trade. Now, I want to make sure that they're making $32,000 a year with their college education versus $132,000 a year being a welder, right? And we're somewhat guilty of that too. I got to tell you, it's interesting. I hear all the time of people who have went and they got their college degree and then went back into the skilled trades because they can make way more money with what's going on. So we've got to deal with immigration, which then leads us to another sticky wicket of the southern border and what's been going on there. But we need to have a healthy, robust immigration system that works. Our immigration system does not work. Yes, do you agree with that? It's not working right now, and whether it's Steve at Request or others, that they've had to get innovative of where they are going with those workers. We've got to have a system that works better than what we have, and frankly, it's become a political football on both sides, and it's a really easy football to kick sometimes. But I've been to the border a couple of times. It's a mess. It's a complete disaster. And in my opinion, quite honestly, probably one of the smartest things that those southern governors did was start giving one-way bus tickets to folks to New York and Chicago and other places so that they could spread the love. Spread the pain, frankly, of what's going on. Because if you go down there with your eyes wide open, the pain, the challenges that have come to those southern border communities are massive. Just think of schools. Think of the healthcare side, not just the logistics of it. The physical space. So we've got to keep tackling those things. And are we able to? I'm hoping so, but they're going to be basically pressure points that's going to be able to bring that.
So now that you've answered all 52 questions that were already submitted ahead of time, well done on that. Just shifting gears slightly, you touched on an important topic, energy, and Michigan recently passed some legislation that's kind of setting a 10-year goal on where our energy is coming from, and depending on what side of the aisle you sit on, you either like it or you don't. But Governor Whitmer is supportive of restarting Palisades. The company that owns it is even suggesting putting some modular reactors there as well. A lot of people need to say yes to this, but could your office play a role if you were supportive in restarting Palisades and working with the Nuclear Regulatory Committee?
Yeah, and actually we have right from the very beginning on the front end of this, and it is going to be expensive. And just quick tutorial on this Palisades nuclear plant, which is now in the new newly created 4th Congressional District. I actually dealt with Palisades when I was in the state legislature because I was the vice chair of the Energy and Technology Committee, and we were dealing with some of the shutdown. Big Rock was getting shut down and decommissioned at the time, and we knew Palisades was on its last legs and didn't have its certificate renewed. They were in complete cold, removed the rods, shut down. And then the administration suggested that we should maybe restart some nuclear sites. It is going to be extremely expensive. I know the states put in, how much, Roger? $150 million, I think. Currently, the request was $300. I think there's another promise for another $150 million. The feds have put in significant amount of money, and Holtec, the ownership, has put in significant amounts of money. To me, this is worth exploring. Not because of the infrastructure that may be currently there, meaning the nuclear facility, but the ability to short circuit the siting and the permitting. That is huge. And again, going back to that 60 Minutes story last night, they were doing some wind farms. They thought it would take 5 years, and they're 17 years into the permitting, mainly from the feds. That is part of our problem is when we're getting at energy issues like this. But you've got an infrastructure to get that energy out. and you've got an infrastructure that's already fenced in, it's been permitted for everything from just the nuclear material handling and those kinds of things. The problem is that most of those folks either retired or moved on, and so they're kind of having to rebuild a little bit of that workforce. But this to me makes sense and is worth the money to explore whether we can revamp some of these and reuse some of these nuclear sites, because nuclear has to be part of the equation. It has to be as we've been moving forward.
So back to debt reduction for a moment. We noticed with the last budget, we've been dealing with a lot of continuing resolutions of late. One of the arguments or theories or ideas to help reduce the debt is some checks that have already been written but haven't been cashed, either when Trump from COVID or Inflation Reduction Act. Is that a method that we could use? Like, hey, we allocated a bunch of money but it hasn't been spent yet, let's try to claw some of that back. Is that a practical strategy?
Yeah, and that has been proposed. We have passed that in the House going back, and it's kind of like if you've been having this money in your bank account for 2 or 3 years and still haven't figured out how to spend it within the parameters of spending it, we could use that money back for a lot of things. That has been proposed. It had gotten some pushback. I understand that, but sorry. A lot of us voted consistently about trying to have some common sense as to what was going out the door. This was just helicopter money that was going out the door, in my opinion. Meaning, you might as well just drop it from a helicopter onto state, local governments, and it's time that we just pull some of that back because we have better, higher uses for it.
So you touched briefly about the border. The new speaker's in place now. There's demand from the administration for funding for Ukraine. President Zelensky will be here this week advocating for some more money. Also, there's requests for additional money to fund Israel. And the speaker's advocating that, sure, we can do that, but we want to tie that to reinvesting and securing our own border at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about your stance on that, and if you think we're going to see any movement on funding for either Ukraine or Israel, and if it will be tied to something?
Yeah, and it's going to be instructional what happened in the Senate, where they rejected all three of those things getting tied together. That's very unsenatorial, by the way. Very senatorial to sit back and say, we're going to take everything on the buffet and put it all into one, and then everybody gets something, and everybody will be disappointed in something, but then they typically would go past that. So it was kind of interesting and instructive. So I'm looking forward to hearing from a couple of my Senate friends what the real story was behind the scenes. Look, there is significant bipartisan support for aid to Israel. And just for perspective, that's an additional $0.6 billion that is being requested. Most of that is to replenish things like Iron Dome and defense systems like that. Israel is not asking us for support for their economy. They're not asking us for certainly direct military support. This is one of the few conflicts in the world where you've actually seen an inflow of people rather than an exiting of people, because you've got Jews from around the world who are saying, I'm going back to defend Israel. That 14 billion vis-a-vis, and I can go back and I could check my notes, but I'm going to do this from memory, and I think I'm going to lowball it here at 144 billion that's gone into Ukraine so far. About 20% of that has been going to support of their economy, meaning we are paying their government folks. USAID has had a significant part of that. So the point is that we've done both military and sort of the social side of that. Europe would argue that they have matched the U.S. on that. There's liars, damn liars, and statisticians, right? As the old saying goes. Apparently, no accountants in here, right? So, or statisticians, sorry. But it depends on how you look at those numbers, right? Because they're counting inflow of refugees into Poland or into Romania, and I've met with the leaders. I just had the ambassador and the chair of their defense committee in my office from Romania, talking about what they've been dealing with, and. Here's ultimately the point is it depends on how you count that, as they've got an influx of people coming into their schools, is that additional spending, is that, or into their hospitals and those kinds of things. There's been a lot of discussion about us helping out on the military side and allowing Europe to then pick up more of that slack on the humanitarian side. We have a bigger military capability, even though we are behind on that. And you got to remember, I think early on, the administration could have and should have done more with whether it was the F-16s going in or from Poland, some other places, or whether it was anti-tank missiles. There was a whole big row about that right at the very beginning, and the administration thought that would look like it was an escalation, and then we ended up sending them anyway, but they were kind of, or some of them, they were too late. So is there an understanding and an agreement to be had? Possibly, but there needs to be more transparency and more accountability in my mind. By the way, did you know that we still have a Inspector General for Afghanistan? All right, he was just in front of our Foreign Affairs Committee, and they are still tracking down leads of waste, fraud, and abuse leading back to the invasion of Afghanistan. So to think that there isn't something happening in Ukraine is probably Pollyannish. Israel is in a much different spot in that the far more transparency. They're just asking for different things. Now, we do have an Inspector General's, USAID, State Department, and DOD all have people on the ground in Ukraine. I've had some very, very skeptical colleagues of mine who have ended up going to Ukraine and have seen the actual barcodes that are on each of the missile launcher, shoulder-fired missiles and those kinds of things. They've actually seen that. We have wonderful technology that we can track things. I don't buy this, Ukrainian oligarchs are buying mansions in Miami internet chatter. There is no evidence of that widespread. But is there opportunity for waste, fraud, and abuse? Absolutely. Has it happened? We just had these 3 inspectors generals in. They said, we have not found it yet, but is it likely? Probably. They have 100 open cases, 100 plus open cases of investigation. Part of their challenge is having people on the ground there doing the investigation. They've been employing some of the local investigators, but they also do have people on the ground in Kyiv. And by the way, the ambassador, our ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Kyiv, to Ukraine, went to East Grand Rapids High School and grew up in Grand Haven. I didn't know that. And I met her in a skiff, with, one of the classified briefings that we were getting. And suddenly she and I were playing Dutch bingo with what was going on. And her family's, in Holland all the time and up in Grand Haven. Her parents have moved now, but they still come back. So her one request, if I came to visit, was to bring some Hudsonville ice cream. I kid you not. That's actually what she said. So I gotta work with Scoob and Den, I think, over at Hudsonville.
Thank you for that. So we've got time for one more question, kind of a quick one, and then I'm going to bring Jody back up to wrap it up for us this morning. But looking into the future, you touched a little bit about, your debt commission and what that might look like in 12 months. But, you have 2 members of Congress on the Republican side. One was expelled, one's resigning, and so the majority is getting smaller, heading into an election year. What do you think that we're going to see out of Congress in the next 12 months in terms of ability to keep the ball rolling, or is it going to kind of go quiet here pretty quick after the new year and we're going to be on hold?
If patterns hold true, nothing will go quickly and nothing will be quiet. It's okay to laugh at that, because if we're not laughing, we're crying right now. This has probably been the most challenging year professionally I've had doing this, both as a staffer and state legislator, and now this. There's been some needless things that have happened that have made it more difficult and actually set us back from our ultimate goals. And Larry, you're right. George Santos was booted out. By the way, that's the first time since Confederates, 3 Confederates who sided with the Confederacy were expelled. We have never expelled anybody from the House of Representatives who has not been convicted of a crime. That includes Jim Traficant and others, and some people. Now, I wish George Santos had the self-dignity to resign. I read the 56-page report. Not a high-quality individual, let's put it that way. But we've already seen how this has been turned into a political weapon. Calls, Adam Schiff lied about Russia and stuff and whatever else. And we've got, at some point, we've got to get off this crazy merry-go-round that's happening. But George Santos is out. Kevin McCarthy is saying he's resigning at the end of the year. I have another colleague, Bill Johnson, who is going to go become president of Youngstown State in Ohio. And that means we are actually down to a one-person majority. That is not functional in our current atmosphere. And so I don't know what is going to happen. I just even in the ensuing 6 weeks of Mike Johnson's speakership, there's been some pretty amazing things. And this is the problem. And this is internal. We've sat in internal meetings, and we've now seen widely across the conference people starting to threaten voting against rules and voting against this and that, and they're going to grind everything to a halt if NDAA isn't passed, or if NDAA is passed. That's the National Defense Authorization Act. What about the FISA court? What about the southern border? What about all these other things? And we've got a number of folks who would like to have 1 or maybe 2 chess moves and then declare checkmate. Well, that's not how chess works, and that's certainly not how the legislative process works. And what is going to happen, I am not sure. We've got January 19 for a series of our spending bills. Those will expire, and then in early February, the rest of them will. There's pledges that we will be in shutdown rather than another continuing resolution. A continuing resolution is a horrible way of governing. It's a terrible way. You're not really able to weed the garden, as I like to say, which is the appropriations process. Figure out what's working, what's not working, pull the the bad stuff out, and put more of the good stuff in. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I do know that if we do go into shutdown, there is a financial cost, significant financial cost, and selfishly, politically, on the Republican side, it has never benefited us. Any of the parties that have shut down government. This is why Chuck Schumer a few years ago, when he was holding some things up, and it got labeled the Schumer shutdown. You've never seen Chuck Schumer move so fast to negotiate ever. He's figured that out. We somehow have an idea that no, it's pure of motive, therefore it will be accepted widely, and it's just not going to be. So, if avoidable, we should avoid it. I just don't know whether it's going to be avoidable or not. But this is definitely going to make for an interesting year. But frankly, we're a third of the way through the fiscal year already. So we're allowing, by not doing anything, we are allowing the previous policies to all stay in place, which I think is a bad idea.
Well, on that high note, I think that we should invite Jody back up and wrap this up. Congressman.
Here's the high note. There's no snow on the ground. How about that? There we go. There we go.
Congressman Huizenga, Michael, thank you. At the West Coast Chamber, we talk about advocacy being one of our main core focus areas. And for us, that means that we provide access to elected officials, education on important issues, and advocating for a business-friendly environment. We're so appreciative to have you representing us in Washington and the work that you're doing that impacts us so significantly back here. If you enjoyed your time this morning and want to dig in further, the Chamber is actually doing our very first fly-in trip. So we're going to take this on the road and go visit the Congressman in Washington, D.C., March 19 through 21. If you're interested in joining us, you'll have a link in your survey today to take you to that registration page. Next month, we're going to be getting back together, but at Engedi Church for our economic forecast on January 9. And with that, please join me in thanking again one more time Congressman Huizenga for joining us here today. Thanks, Bill. Thank you again to all of our sponsors, and thank you to each of you for joining us today. Go make it a remarkable day. Thank you.